All right, we are live. Good evening and welcome to Mishnah Mastery. We really need to come up with a catchy theme tune, I think, for Mishnah Mastery. We've got one for This Is How We Do It. No one's written me a theme song for Mishnah Mastery yet, but there's still time. We are going to go through, starting from chapter 16 tonight. We're going to get it up for you on the screen over here. Let me know if you can see it. And let me know if you can't. Everybody got it there? Excellent. All right. So, pardon me? You can mute yourselves. Yeah, sure thing. Go for it. But do unmute yourself if you wish to ask a question at any point or chime in. Please feel free to do that. This is audience participation is all welcome. All right, so, have I just lost the screen? What have I just done? Screen sharing. What have I just done, guys? What have I just done? I've just put it over there, that's why. Okay, no, my goodness me. Technology does not like us tonight. Okay, let's get it back up. Everyone still got it? Okay, here we go then. Chapter 16, let's give it a shot. We are going to be starting off tonight by talking about saving items in a situation, God forbid, if a person has to deal with a fire. What are you allowed to save? And what are you not allowed to save? So our problem over here is that if we allow someone to do something which is permissible by the Torah, we have a concern that you are going to be too attached to your property. And so instead of carrying stuff out in a permissible way, you're just going to go and extinguish the fire by yourself, which is prohibited by the Torah. So therefore, what we're going to see is that Chazal, the sages, the rabbis, said that we should separate ourselves emotionally as best we can from saving all our possessions, and in so doing, prioritize being able to save things without violating any of the melachot of Shabbat. So that is where this is all coming from. That's by way of introduction to Mishnah Aleph, which we're going to start now. Kol kisvei hakodesh matzilin osan mipnei hadleika. All sacred writings, all scrolls may be saved from a fire. Bein shekarin bahen uvein she'ein karin bahen. Whether we read from them or whether we do not read from them. So Torah scroll, we read from it, that would be allowed. Nevi'im, if it was a scroll of one of the books of the prophets, we would be allowed to save it. And says the Mishnah, even if it's something that we don't read, and that includes ketuvim, the writings. And the reason why they are called something that we don't read is because back in the day, instead of people just kind of sitting to learn nice, easy to understand texts, which apparently ketuvim would have been considered, they wanted people to attend the Beit Midrash. They wanted them to sit and listen to the various shiurim and Torah classes. And so they would tell people, or at the time, they would not read from scrolls in ketuvim. How very interesting. And yet we see we're allowed to save them nonetheless. So continues the Mishnah, Va'afal pisha kesuvim b'chol lashon, even though they would be written in any language, if it is a Torah, if it is from Tanakh, translated into whatever language, su'unim geniza. What we are told is that they would all need geniza if we needed to get rid of them for whatever reason, so not necessarily related to fires, but just generally, they would all require geniza. So the Mishnah asks, why would these be things that we do not read from, such as ketuvim? And the answer is, bitul beit midrash. It is considered neglect of the study house for you to stay in your own environs and read such scrolls. We should be attending our public Torah classes. like we're doing tonight. How fantastic. Continues the Mishnah. Matzilin tik hasefer im hasefer. We can save the coverings of the scrolls along with the scrolls. V'tikat tefillin im tefillin. And similarly, we can save the tefillin bags with the tefillin. V'afal pi sheyesh b'toichan mars. And even though they might have money in them, you know, because you take your tefillin to shul once upon a time, and you would give money as part of your shacharit proceedings. So, so even though they may contain money, you'd still be allowed to save them. And if we can think about this for a second, we've also got issues of switching domains that we've talked about before, going from private to public and public to private. So that is why the Mishnah then says, where are you allowed to rescue them to? And the answer is the Mishnah, it must be an alley that is closed, or more accurately to translate, that is not open, meaning it has to have 3 sides, and the 4th side must have the required provision to make it halachically closed, which we'll learn about more in other places. But we have to give that alleyway an eruv, which means either we have to have a beam at the entrance to it or a beam across the top of it, and in so doing, that will halachically make it an enclosed space. So that is the requirement according to the first position in the Mishnah, that it has to be a closed alleyway to be able to carry these things out. Ben Basera Omer Aflam Fulash. Ben Basera says, even if it is not a closed alleyway, you would be allowed to save these things. Richard. Would a woman be able to save her ketubah? Well, that's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. What would that be considered? That wouldn't be something with Hashem's name in it. It wouldn't be considered something with Hashem's name in it, so it might come under some of these other categories. Pardon me?
I was just thinking from a practical perspective, shouldn't be able to carry on living with her husband.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I don't have a clear answer for you from this one Mishnah. And also, as with all of these things, we never really reach the practical implications in every variance and every variable. Sometimes we have to leave those things for more in-depth study. But I can tell you now, I don't recall seeing a woman's ketubah being mentioned explicitly in these Mishnayot. So, as we like to say, Sarich Ian requires further investigation. And we continue, for now, with Mishnah base. Matzilin mazon shalosh seudos hara'ui la'adam la'adam. We can save enough food for 3 meals that would be fitting for a person, for each person. So we can save 3 meals that would be fit for each person. Hara'ui labahema labahema. We can save 3 meals worth that would be fit for an animal. And the Mishnah is going to flesh this out some more. Ketzad, how is this the case? Nafla deleka b'leilei Shabbos. Let's say the fire breaks out on Friday night. Matzilin mazon shalosh seudas. Then I can save enough food to last me Friday night dinner, Shabbos lunch, and Suda Shlishit. So it's up to 3 meals that the Mishnah is talking about. B'shacharis, if the fire breaks out in the morning, Matzilin mazon shtei sudas, then I can save enough for lunch and for Suda. B'mincha, and if it's in the afternoon, mazon suda achas, then I can save enough food for 1 meal. Rabbi Yossi Omer, la'olam matzilin mazon shalosh sudas. Rabbi Yossi says you can always save 3 meals worth if whenever the fire was to, God forbid, break out. Continue with Mishnah Gimel, other household items. And we ask the question now, what if you have got the food in a basket and there's other foods inside that basket? So says the Mishnah, Matzilin sal male kikaros. You can save a basket that is full of loaves of bread. Even if there's enough for 100 meals. Because you are carrying out a basket. It just so happens that there's loads of stuff inside that basket. And so whatever's inside can be saved with this basket that you're carrying out. Continues the mission of the Igul Shel Devela. If it is a cake of pressed figs, the chavis shel yain, and a barrel of wine. So you're carrying out enough to last you 3 meals. It just so happens you've got 100 meals worth of wine or 100 meals worth of pressed figs. If it's all in there, then you are allowed to take it out. Not only that, but you can say to other people, come and save for yourselves. Now, what's interesting here, the Mishnah is careful to point out, come and save for yourselves, because what you would have to do if you were, God forbid, in this situation, is you would have to forego that food for yourself, allow others to come and take it for themselves, and hope that they're just going to be really, really nice and sell it back to you after Shabbos. So we can't tell people to come and save for us, but we can tell people to save for themselves. Whatever their mindset is another story. So that's why the Mishnah says, if you were wise, so if you're wise, they will make an account with him after Shabbos, and in that way you'll be able to get those things saved, but they don't have to do it for nothing. People, if they wanted to, could actually bargain with the guy and sell the food back to him after Shabbos. So the Mishnah asks, where can you save these things to? Answers the Mishnah, you can carry them into a courtyard which has been set up with an Eruv beforehand. Ben Beseira Omer, Ben Beseira says, even if it has not been given an Eruv Chatzeros, meaning that you have worked with the other residents in the courtyard to make that space a space that you are allowed to carry to, shared ownership of the courtyard to be able to carry things in and out on Shabbos. So according to the first position in the Tanna Kama, you would have to have done that before Shabbos, and then you can carry it out. And according to Ben Beseira, even if you had not done, you can forego that particular halacha of Erev Chatzerot, and you can therefore take out to a courtyard on Shabbos. Continues with Mishnah Daled. Ulasham, and to there, Motzi Kol Klei Tashmisha, you can take out all your utensils. Velovesh Kol Ma She'achol Lilbosh, and you can wear whatever you can wear. Ve'otef Kol Ma She'achol La'atof, and you can wrap yourself into whatever you can wrap yourself. Whatever you can get out of the house, you may do so. But the point is that we're supposed to be trying to do these things without breaking any halachot. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Shmona Asar Kelim. Rabbi Yossi says he limits it. He says you can only take out 18 pieces of clothing. Because let's be realistic. No one is ever going to wear more than 18 items of clothing. And so that is his limit, according to Rabbi Yossi. So I guess you would count each sock individually, for example. So he can't ever fathom a situation where you would ever wear more than 18 items of clothing. And so that, for Rabbi Yossi, is the limit. Now, even within the world of Rabbi Yossi, if it was the heat of summer and you wanted to put on your winter coat to be able to save it, it would be your entitlement to be able to do that. So I guess these 18 items, and it could be that the Gemara does explain this fully, but it could be that these 18 items will be like in the depths of winter, what would you wear? Even if it was summertime when you needed to bring these things out, 18 seems to be the maximum. Says the Mishnah, though, that you can keep going back in and putting more clothes on and coming out with them in order to save more things. And you can say to other people as well, that you can say to others, come and save these items with me. Why is this different? Why do we say by food that he has to say save for yourself, and with clothing you can save it with me? So the reason is because we're not actually carrying when we take these items out, we are wearing them. And so a person is allowed to wear clothes on Shabbos. So you can tell someone to save them on your behalf and save them with you, because he's not going to be carrying to be able to do that. He's going to be wearing the items. So I hope that distinction is somewhat clear. Okay, we continue with Mishnah. Hey, Mishnah 5. Other methods of preventing a fire from spreading. So Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Nanas says, Parsin or shel gedi al gabe shida teba umigdal sha'achaz bahen et ha'or. You are allowed to spread a goat skin over a chest, or over a box, or over a migdal, which is translated there as a trunk. Sha'achaz bahen es ha'or, which has already caught fire. And it says the Mishnah because it will only singe the goat skin. So it's going to not necessarily suffocate the fire, but it could prevent the fire from spreading. Because again, we're not allowed to put fire out, but we are allowed to take steps to prevent it from spreading, which is why the Mishnah now tells us, you can make a barrier with your vessels, Bain Malayim, Bain Rekanim, whether you have filled them up with water or whether you have not filled them up with water. So what's the logic with filling up with water? Well, the hope is that the fire will spread towards this barrier of pots or whatever it is, and the heat of the fire will cause them to burst, and the water will hopefully put out the fire. But you said we can't extinguish fire. Well, this indirect method of extinguishing fire would be acceptable according to the halacha as presented in the Mishnah. So you're allowed to make this barrier of vessels if they've been filled with water or not, so that the fire won't necessarily progress beyond that point, that threshold. Rabbi Yossi oseh b'kli cheres chadashim leimayim. However, Rabbi Yossi takes a different position. He says that you're not allowed to make this barrier with brand new earthenware pots that are filled with water, because they definitely cannot withstand the heat from the fire, and they're definitely going to smash, and that will put the fire out. So Rabbi Yossi is of the opinion that if it's a clear consequence of your actions, then you would not be allowed to do it. But that is not the position of the Tanna Kama, of the first authority in the Mishnah. Continues with Mishnah Vav. Nachri Shabbat lechabos. What if a non-Jew comes to extinguish? For example, the firefighters are called, the fire brigade is called, and they come to put out the fire. Should you tell them, hey, you can't do that on my behalf on Shabbos? Says the Mishnah, Nachri Shabbat lechabos. If a non-Jew comes to put out the fire, Ein omrim lo kabeh va'al techabeh. You're not allowed to say to him, yes, please extinguish it for me. And you're not allowed to say, hey, don't extinguish it. If he decides to do it of his own accord, gesundheit, hey, he may do that and put out the fire. But we are not supposed to instruct him to put a fire out, because we're not allowed to ask non-Jewish people to do malacha on our behalf. So, whether you can maybe hint it and say, it's awfully hot in here, or over there, because you're standing outside hoping that your house doesn't get burnt down, but you wouldn't be allowed to instruct the non-Jew to put the fire out on Shabbos. So in a similar vein, we wouldn't necessarily be able to ask a non-Jewish person to call the fire brigade. Okay, Mary needs to go to bed, Angel. And now the whole...
I assume this doesn't apply, Rabbi, if there's a threat to life.
So yeah, obviously the practical ramifications, not only of threat to life, but threat to the property of our surrounding neighbors, often who will be not Jewish. So we do see variances in the practical application of these halachot in this day and age. But as presented in the Mishnah, where it's a relatively unfortunate thing. If you were living on a property that was not at risk of damaging anything else, and you had belongings in there which would just not be permissible to take out, then unfortunately there's little wiggle room in that regard, and it's it can have the potential of being a very sad thing. Martin, I had a feeling you were going to unmute yourself.
If you're in an area where there is a courtyard and there's not going to be other properties around, so I think they're looking at they're just trying to work out rules and regulations which they can take forward for other things. This situation is so unlikely to happen.
Yeah. I mean, the backdrop to all of this we have to appreciate as well is understanding two things. One, not to be so overly possessive of our possessions, and not to sacrifice the spiritual parts of Shabbos because of material possessions. Obviously, with threat to life, that's something else entirely. But the caution here is to prioritize our spiritual welfare above our material welfare. So that is that's largely the backdrop to a lot of these Mishnahs. So we have a non-Jew who's coming, and we're not allowed to say extinguish, and we're not allowed to tell him to stop extinguishing, because his resting for his own sake, his abstention from work on Shabbos for his sake, is not upon us to interfere with. So we can't ask a non-Jew to abstain from working on our behalf or to work on our behalf, but if it's on his behalf because he's professionally employed to do so, or because he just wants to put it out because that's what he wants to do, so we do not interfere with that. Aval katan shebalachabos, but what if a minor comes to extinguish? Then the Mishnah says as follows: Ein shomin lo, they must not listen to him, mipnei shevisa shevisa so alehem, because his resting is upon you. Now we seem to be talking here about your own kid. We don't seem to be talking about another child. So we're not supposed to prevent other children from breaking Shabbos in a way that might benefit us. But if it is your own child, then we are actually supposed to interfere in that regard, because their abstention does rely on you. Okay. Mishnah Zion, Kofin Ka'ara al Gabe Haner. One may turn a dish on top of a candle, in order that the fire should, the flame, the light should not set the beams on fire. Va'al so'a shel katan, separately now, not to do with fire. One can cover the excrement of an infant, of a child. And you're allowed to cover a scorpion so that it should not bite anyone. Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, that the situation came, it happened to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai when he was in Arav, which is Arabia, the name of the place. Amar Chosheshani, same word? Yeah, Chosheshani lo mechatas. I fear that he may be liable for a sin offering, meaning that it could be, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, with regards to a scorpion, that you wouldn't have been allowed to cover the scorpion because you'll be trapping it. And so it could, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at least, he was fearful that that was an improper halacha to follow. So therefore, according to him, you would not be allowed to cover a scorpion, unless, of course, it was of that risk to a person's life. But if it wasn't, then you wouldn't be allowed to cover it. Says Mishnah Ches, Nachri shehidlik esaner, a non-Jew who has lit a candle, mishtamish la'or Yisrael. So if the non-Jew has lit the candle on his own behalf, mishtamil la'or Yisrael, then a Jew is allowed to benefit from that light. And that's because of the principle of ner le'echad, ner le'me'ah. If you light a candle for one person, then the light, there's no way of sectioning off the light, so it only benefits one person. If you turn on a light, if you light a candle, that light is going to be of benefit to anybody in the vicinity, because that's just the way light works. So if a non-Jew lights a candle or turns on a light in order that he can benefit from it, a Jew may also make use of the light as well. So he could sit down to read, for example, if it would have been too dark for him to read beforehand, because the light has not been lit on his behalf. However, says the Mishnah, V'im b'shvil Yisrael, if the light has been lit by the non-Jew because the Jew required it, then says the Mishnah, Asur, it would be forbidden from a Jew to benefit from this light. Mila mayim lahashkos behemto. If a non-Jew fills up a jug of water in order to feed his own animal, to give his own animal to drink, mashke acharav Yisrael, then a Jew is allowed to benefit from that water afterwards. V'im b'shvil Yisrael. However, if he filled up this jug, and we have to understand, we're talking about filling a jug at a well in a public place and then moving that water into a private place, that's the issue at hand over here. If that has been done on the Jew's behalf, asur, then it will be forbidden for the non-Jew to benefit from it. So whatever is being done that the non-Jew can benefit as well, then it will be permitted for a Jew to use. But if the benefit is exclusively to the Jewish person, then you would not be allowed to benefit from it. Continues the Mishnah. Asa goy, a non-Jew is allowed to make a kevesh le'red bo. He is allowed to set up a plank to be able to disembark from a ship. And if he does that for his own sake, yored acharav Yisrael, then a Jew may follow on and also make use of the plank. V'im b'shvil Yisrael, but if he did it exclusively for a Jewish person, asur, then the Jew would not be allowed to benefit from that plank. Ma'aseh Rabban Gamliel uzkenin. There was a time when Rabban Gamliel and some sages and some elders, shahayu ba'im b'sfina, they were traveling on a boat. V'asa goy, I don't know, maybe they were on a Caribbean cruise, who knows? I don't think they were there. V'asa goy kevesh le'red bo, and a non-Jewish person set up a ramp to be able to disembark from the boat. V'yardu bo Rabban Gamliel zukenim, and they came down from the boat since the non-Jewish person has set it up for his behalf as well. Mazel tov on finishing.
I'm very surprised
Almost Mazel tov.
because I remember going on a cruise and I remember there was a whole conference about these things.
Yeah.
And we were told that we couldn't get off the ship on Shabbat. We had to stay on the ship.
Yeah, I've also heard that before.
Was that to do with getting back on it on Shabbat?
Maybe. Might be.
But the ruling was that if the ship, when it was docked, whether it was before Shabbat or not, on Shabbat itself, we were not allowed to leave the ship.
So I don't know enough off the top of my head to answer the question, but what you say about re-embarking does ring a bell. Let me just see if I've got anything in my notes here. I don't think that I do. Again, we have to we can't take everything as, often the Mishnah is the starting point for these halachot, not the finishing point. So I can research that further and come back to you on it. All I can do at this point is present as it is in the Mishnah. But there we go. We've got a topic for a great share one day about cruises and Shabbos. Although, because of the number of issues that come up with cruises on Shabbos, I don't know how many people will tune into it. So, chapter 17. Here we go. Ready? Excellent. Kol ha'kelim nitalim b'Shabbos v'tal tosehen imahen. So we're talking now about some of the halachot of muktzah, moving things that we should not be moving on Shabbos. And we're going to be talking primarily about vessels and different things that get broken. So, kol hakelim nitalim b'Shabbos v'tal tosein imahem. All vessels all utensils may be moved around on Shabbos, along with their doors or their covers. Afal pi shenisparku b'Shabbos. Even if those coverings had come off on Shabbos, and we're going to see this is at variance with doors that come off a house. This is not similar to doors of a house. Now, what's at stake over here is whether or not these lids and these doors have any other purpose on Shabbos. If they can be made use of in another way, then you would be allowed to use them. You'd be allowed to cover other things with them. But a door, it's supposed here, a door of a house, only has one purpose. And so if it loses that purpose on Shabbos, you would not be allowed to move it around because it would be muktzah. So that is the backdrop to this Mishnah over here. We are allowed to move those items that broke off, but we're not allowed to move around a door that breaks off on Shabbos because that would only have one purpose. Continues with Mishnah base. The fact that we are allowed to use a vessel which is primarily used for one malacha, but you are looking to do something else with it. So we wouldn't be allowed to use these items to do something that is forbidden on Shabbos. But if you were doing something else with it, then the Mishnah is going to tell us that we can use those items. So continues with Mishnah base. Notel Adam Kurnas lefatzea bo es ha'egozim. A person is allowed to take a hammer in order to use it as a nutcracker. The kardom lachtoches advela. You're allowed to take an axe to cut up a cake of pressed figs. Megera. You're allowed to take a saw. Ligror ba es hagvina. In order to saw your cheese. You're allowed to take a magrefa, pitchfork, or a rake. Ligror ba es hagros. You're allowed to scoop up dried figs. Es harachas, a shovel. Ve'es hamazleg. And a pitchfork, latet alav lekatan, in order to get food ready for a child. Es hakush, you're allowed to take a needle. Ve'es hakarka, and a threading instrument I've got written here, a shuffle. Litchav bo, in order to stick into food, I guess to make a kebab. Machat shel yad, you're allowed to take a sewing needle. Little ba es hakot, in order to remove a thorn. V'shel sakayim, you're allowed to take a big needle, big thick needle, liftach ba esadelet, in order to open a door. You know, sometimes when your door is stuck and you get a credit card to slip in there to dislodge the latch. So you'd be allowed to do something like that on Shabbos, even though these items, you wouldn't be allowed to use them on Shabbos because they're usually used for malacha. You'd be allowed to use them for these other purposes. Continues with Mishnah Gimel. Kana shel zaysin, a reed for olives. What they would do is, in order to see how hard or soft olives were, you'd stir them all around so that the harder ones would be on the top and they would soften up the lower ones, or vice versa, not really sure. Kana shel zaysin, im yesh kesher barosho, if this stick has a knot on the top of it, so that it has a kind of scooping capability. Apologies, Cedric, I thought I texted. Im yesh kesher barosho mikabel tuma, then it has the status of a vessel and it will be susceptible to impurity. V'im lav, if it doesn't, ein mikabel tuma. If it didn't have this receptacle at the end of it, then it would not be mikabel tuma because it's just a stick. Ben kach u ben kach, whichever way around you want to put it, whether it has this thing at the end of it or not, nital b'Shabbos, you'd be allowed to handle it on Shabbos. Mishnah Daled, things which are inherently vessels, it is allowed to use them for permissible actions on Shabbos. But if it is not an inherently usable vessel, such as a stone, then it's going to be forbidden. So that's the backdrop to Mishnah Daled. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, Kol ha'kelim nitalin, all vessels may be handled on Shabbos, chutz min hamasar hagadol, except for a very large saw, which is used exclusively for building, the yaseid shel macharesha, or a pin, the spike of a plow, which would be exclusively used for plowing. It's got no other use. So according to Rabbi Yossi, you'd not be allowed to use those on Shabbos. And even if they could be used for other things, since they could get blunt from these other usages, according to Rabbi Yossi, you would not be allowed to use them. All vessels may be carried, whether they can be put to use or whether they cannot be put to use. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Ein nitalin ela letzorich. Rabbi Nechemia says you can only move things around if they do serve a purpose. And this is a separate concerns over here, such as moving things around because they are of value to you. So that can create problems as well. Moving around expensive items that you have no use for could be a problem. Moving things around because they might be susceptible to damage. Also considerations. Again, we are not here now to flesh all of those different variables out, but this would be a good starting point to exploring those topics. Continuing with Mishnah Hey, Kol ha'kelim hanitalim b'Shabbos. All vessels which can be carried on Shabbos. So if something was once part of a vessel and it still has significance, it can still be classified as a vessel. something of utility, as long as it can be used. So it's a question here of, we're going to see whether it can be used for the same kind of thing, not for the same kind of thing. Let's take a look. All things which may be used, moved around on Shabbos. Bits that have broken off can also be carried around as well. As long as they can still perform some kind of use on Shabbos. Shivrei areva, fragments from a kneading bowl, lechasos bahen es pia chavis, could still be used to cover the mouth of a barrel. Shivrei zechuchis, fragments of glass, lechasos bahen es pia pach, can still be used to cover the top of a flask. And so those things would be able to be used on Shabbos, even if they had broken before Shabbos, because they still have utility. Rabbi Yehuda says if it's broken on Shabbos, it must be used for the same purpose. Otherwise, you are changing its function on Shabbos, which is a problem. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer, as long as they can be of the same use. Shivrei areva latzuk latoicha mikpa. You'd only be allowed to move this fragment from a kneading bowl if you were using it to pour a thick mixture into it. V'shel zechuchis, and glass latzuk laseichan shemen. As long as you are using it to pour oil into, it must have utility in accordance with its regular usage. Continuing with Mishnah Vav. Normally, stones are muktzah unless you have designated it for a purpose. However, it seems that pumpkins back in the day were used out, they would be hollowed out and then used for drawing water. But I hear you cry, empty pumpkins will float. Ah, well, that is why they had stones to put in the pumpkins in order to give it some extra weight. So that is the introduction to Mishnah Vav. Ha'even shebakiruya, if you have a stone inside a hollowed out pumpkin, im mamalin ba ve'eno nefeles, if one can draw the water without the stone falling out, then you may do so. Ve'im lav eino malin ba. If you cannot do that, then you cannot use that pumpkin to draw the water. Zamarashi kashur b'tafiach. If you have a vine branch that is tied to a pitcher, mamalin ba b'Shabbos, then you may use it to fill up on Shabbos. Continuing with Mishnah Zayin. We're talking here about different types of shutters for windows. So the Mishnah says as follows: Pekak hachalon, a window shutter, which would be it would seal a window temporarily. The idea is that it can be opened and closed or taken off and put back on. So sometimes they would suspend them from the wall, and sometimes they would swing into place. I think we might need a picture for this one. What chapter are we on? 17. I say we might need a picture for this one. I think I might need a picture for this one. So, Pekak hachalon. Sometimes they would dangle down and be suspended and put into place, and sometimes they would be loose fitting and would be picked up and put into a window frame. So, here we go. Mishnah Zayin, Pekak hachalon. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer says, "Bizman shehu kashuv v'talui." If they are tied down and dangling down, pokakimbo, then they may be used to plug the window. Vim lav in pokakimbo. But if they are not, if they're just kind of lying around and you pick them up to plug the hole, then you would not be allowed to do that on Shabbos, because that would be a problem of building. Chachamim omrim, Chachamim say ben kach uben kach, whether it is hanging, whether it is not hanging, whether it is loose, whatever it is, pokakimbo, you would be allowed to plug your window with it, according to Chachamim. Finally, for this perek, with Mishnah Ches, Kol Kisuye Hakelim, Sheyesh lahem beit achiza nitalim b'Shabbos. Any utensil that has a lid, all lids of utensils that have a handle, nitalim b'Shabbos, may be moved around on Shabbos. Amar Rabbi Yossi, to explain this a bit further, Rabbi Yossi says, Bamed Varim Amurim, what are we talking about? The Kisui Karka. We are talking about lids which cover the ground, such as over pits or ditches, those kinds of things. Aval Kisui Hakelim, but when it comes to coverings for utensils, for pots and pans and all those kinds of things, Ben Kach u Ben Kach, whether they have handles or not, Nitalim b'Shabbos, you will be allowed to move them on Shabbos. Mazel Tov on completing chapter 17. We've been going for 40 minutes. We could go for a little bit longer and do another chapter, or we could leave it there for today. What do you want?
Fortunately, my wife has called me in for supper, so 8:30 I told her.
Okay. Well, 40 minutes in, if you want to catch it on YouTube. What about anyone else? Should we leave it there today? Richard seems to have disappeared. Dan? Anyone? Are you not able to unmute yourselves?
It's up to you, Rabbi. I've got to go to an exec meeting now.
So do I.
Lucky man. Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good evening. See you in a second on the other side.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. That answers the question.
So shall we stop it there for tonight?
Yeah.
It won't be on this channel. It won't be on this channel. Okay, so then I guess
Start with 16 or 15? I can't remember. Which one did you start with?
we started with 16,
Okay.
and we've just got to 18, and I think we'll blitz through 18 next week then. All right. So then that's all for this week, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an honor and a privilege sharing this with you tonight, and have a wonderful and meaningful evening.